Hello, and welcome back to more stories with Mr. Faber. I'm your host, Mr. Faber, and welcome to Adventures of Atticus, Reign of Doom. This is the second book of Adventures of Atticus. Now, there's two things that I want to start you off with before jumping into this book. First, this book is a little darker than the first book. So if you felt like Gundren Michael was the limit to your bad guyness, then you might want to reconsider listening to this book. The second thing I'd like to mention is that this book is not complete. I started this book back when I was 23 years old, and I'm 34 now, so I should be finishing it up. But I haven't, because my music is what inspires the story. If you're wondering how these stories, how I decide the angles, it's actually not my decision. I listen to music, it pieces together, and that's what happens. That's why, as you probably have figured out, Atticus dies 4 times. It's because the music that I was listening to in the first book had him dying a lot. It's just how the music is, so I can't help it. So the second book is not complete. There's a lot of holes. I've got a nice beginning, I got a nice ending. There's a bunch of holes in the middle. That means that when I'm telling the story, I might say something like, oh, that thing I told you yesterday, it actually doesn't happen until later in the chapter. So I might have to shift things around a little bit, but hopefully it's not too confusing for you. You'll see the highlights of the story. And for those of you that do listen to music that's kind of like the Adventures of Atticus music, that's music that doesn't have lyrics a lot of times, or the lyrics don't are not really understandable, or in a different language or something like that. That would be great, and hopefully I can get this story finished one of these years. So, fantastic. We're going to go ahead and just jump right into The Adventures of Atticus, Reign of Doom. It has been 413 years since the first book. All those years that have passed, Atticus has continued to stay alive because his healing power actually keeps him from aging as well. And so even though he's 435 years old, he looks like he's still in his 30s. Adora also inherits that same trait because of the gift that Atticus had given to her. Zeus actually had the same gift. That healing power was actually something that ran in the family. The only reason we never saw it with Zeus is because he never really jumped into battles and got shot up the way that Atticus did. Arania, as you would imagine, related to the two boys, was also able to stay young even into her 430s. Zales and Poseidon were not so lucky. However, Zales, a very smart scientist, figured this out at about 48, 49 years old, realizing that Atticus wasn't aging, and she figured out the secret to his blood and was able to create an antidote for herself and Poseidon, allowing them to live longer. So all these people that we've come to love are still alive after 413 years, albeit Zales and Poseidon have a little bit of gray and a few wrinkles on their skin more than the others. Now, in this world, certain things have grown amazingly. Zeus stayed on planet Earth, and through his years developed a wisdom and a kindness that was unsurpassed. He created a unity across the planet so amazing that war was virtually eliminated, famine gone, environmental destruction eliminated. And Zeus created a golden age for the planet Earth, the likes of which no one had seen. Zales, Poseidon, Adora, Arania, and Atticus went off to the 3 planets where they would rule, and eventually they became myth and legend to the people on planet Earth, as well as the people living on the 3 planets. You see, legend has it on planet Earth that there are superhumans that live on these 3 planets. And it was true. You see, the generations of children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of Atticus, of Arania, of Zales, Poseidon, of all these superhumans created superhumans. And Throughout the years, races were born of this superhuman kind, and they moved to these 3 planets. Of course, we have the plentiful Atticans. Now, they would be the most populous too if they hadn't gone to war with each other so often. The Atticans eventually renamed themselves as elementals because as the generations went down, they found that they controlled more than just metal. Now, each person could control one type of element. For example, one elemental might control fire, another metal, another wind or electricity, but never could one elemental hold 2 powers. They also noticed that as Atticus grew older and older, he continued to gain new powers, controlling more than just metal, but electricity, fire, water, earth, the entire elements at his fingertips. And unlike his brother Zeus, who ruled with wisdom and kindness on planet Earth, Atticus found that his best tool was fear, for he had become the most powerful human that the universe had ever known. Now, there were, of course, Zeus's descendants who came from planet Earth to live on the 3 planets to be part of the superhumans. They originally called themselves the Zeusians, but eventually changed their names to Eletians, which meant the elite of humanity. They, unlike their forefather Zeus, instead of treasuring wisdom, treasured knowledge, and used that knowledge to build amazingly technologically advanced cities, but were, however, very, very proud of their knowledge and had even learned how to telepathically talk to each other, but felt they were way better than any other race. Then there were the Zalites. Of course, Zales and Poseidon had many children, but some of them had the power of Zales to fly, and some of them had the power of power from Poseidon. And so Zales, the ones who had Zales' traits, became known as the Zalites, although they eventually became known as the Isaurians, or flyers. And they ended up building these vast cities that floated in the clouds. It was quite stunning. Of course, Poseidons never ever really wanted to become Poseidonites. First of all, because it was a weird thing to say, and second of all, Poseidon forbid that anyone call them Poseidonites. So they decided to be called Olympians. From the ancient Greek, that means for the strong. The Olympians built great, vast cities of huge stone. The walls, the buildings, everything was big and heavy. I mean, a child Olympian could open a door, no problem, but an adult, normal human would have a very hard time opening a door in an Olympian city. And then there were the, let's see, did we get Zeus? Yep, we got Zeus. Then there were the Uranians. The Uranians were much like their ancestor, much like Urania. They were quiet and they liked to stay in the shadows. They ended up making a city, but however, the city was empty. I mean, it looked empty. Most of the time, people were invisible. Since Urania had children, she had discovered that when she was invisible, she could see other people who were invisible too. So it actually became quite a game of hide and seek, because Urania, when invisible, could be invisible to any normal person, but could not be invisible to the children of hers, who were also able to turn invisible and see her. It was quite a tricky thing. Well, about 150 years after these races started building their own cities and sort of banding themselves away from each other, there started to grow a hatred. The Eletians thought they were better than anyone. The Isaurians thought those Uranians were hiding away for something. They had something secret. The Olympians never trusted the Isaurians, even though their forefather was married to their foremother. Anyway, and of course the elementals The elementals, when they weren't fighting with each other, they were fighting with anyone that was near their borders. They felt they owned that whole planet, that first planet, and of course that wasn't true. But the elementals also had developed tribes where they wouldn't even trust each other as far as elementals went. There was the metal tribe and the fire tribe, the ice tribe and the wind tribe, and they wouldn't even trust each other. Well, after 150 years, a great war broke out. And Atticus, seeing and hearing the news of planet Earth and how his brother was treating how he was leading, he was trying to do the same. He was trying to create peace. And he was saying, guys, let's not fight. But regardless, these races had no fear of him. And so they continued to fight until war broke out. The Elysians started fighting the Olympians. The Olympians started fighting the Isaurians. The Isaurians on the Iranians. The Iranians on anyone that would come near them. And the elementals attacking anyone that they could just for the excuse of fighting. This fighting continued for several years until a terrible, terrible tragedy happened. Urania, during a battle, was killed. And in that moment where Atticus heard this news, his rage furied out. It spilled out, and it began to cover all the planets. His anger started covering, and he went from army to army, and he single-handedly defeated each army, not leaving a single survivor. This was the most horrific thing Atticus had ever done. And yet, what he had done in that moment was create a very uneven peace. A very dangerous peace. Because now, the entire planets had come to peace. But Atticus was the one thing holding it together. Because Atticus made a declaration that day at the end of those wars. He told all of the 3 planets, if anyone should raise their arms against another, no matter what, then they will die. They and their entire town will die if they should raise their hand against anyone. And for years, for centuries, Atticus created a peace that no one dared to test. Of course, in that war, all Iranians had been lost. And Urania too. This tragic loss is what caused Atticus to do what he did. I mean, some people might say he went overboard, but you have to understand that what he lost was not only his cousin, but his cousin's children and his cousin's children's children and children's children's children. He lost so much, and so that's why he did what he did. And thus, we begin our story with these races. Now, really quickly, before we go into the next chapter, I do want to bring up that perhaps you might enjoy the story a little bit if you were to think of yourself as one of these races. Perhaps you might enjoy it a little bit. All right, continuing on. Zeus did what he was normally doing on that particular day. He had a special telescope pointed to the 3 planets to overlook his brother's domain. He wanted to keep an eye, and he wanted to keep, even though he hadn't seen his brother in something like 200 years, he wanted to just see him. And so Zeus was looking at this particular day when he noticed that all of a sudden these black ships started appearing all around the 3 planets. And they started doing this thing. They had this black energy that started coming down. Like the ships weren't landing. They were just randomly testing the different creatures that were on the planet, including random people on the planet. And as they were pulling up these random people, as far as the people on the three planets were concerned, they never looked to the skies. They were always too concerned about the race that they were and who they were fighting against, who they were sneering at or not sneering at, or things like that. And so when they saw people go missing, they started getting angry and thinking, no, it's the Elysians, no, it's the Isaurians, it's those Olympians, and they got angry. And Atticus said, don't you dare, when all of a sudden Atticus's own wife, Adora, and his two children all of a sudden got swept up by this energy. Now, to kill Atticus's cousin sent him into a rage. To kill his wife and children, or at least make them disappear, who knows what's happened to them, Atticus would not have it. And he started falling into this rage. He started tearing through any place he could think of to find his wife and children. And because there was no longer a leader with any sanity, that pin that held that peace was gone. And the war, the Second World Wars, because there are three worlds, the Second World's War broke out. Elysians, Olympians, Isaurians, and Elementals going to war with each other. Not only because they had no leader to stop them, but also because of the disappearances. The random disappearances that were driving everyone mad. Alright, we gotta jump ahead. So, Zeus has been seeing this whole thing, and his heart is breaking because he sees this war that had been fought to stop, and he sees his brother, and he knows that's not the real Atticus. He knows that Atticus is grieving. He's sad because he's lost his wife and children, and Atticus, or what's his name, Zeus, can see that the people aren't dying necessarily. He's trying to do a study of these creatures that are in this black ship, and he's noticing that they are definitely not humans. He's classifying them as Desdemonians, or of demon kind, because they kind of look creepy, really creepy. They look kind of demonic. So he's classifying them as this, and then he's realizing that they're not getting it, that none of the people are looking up. They're so focused on the war that they're not looking at for these ships, and there are like thousands of ships now surrounding all three of these planets. And so Zeus decides he's going to go there. He's asking some humans to go with him too. And this is a terrifying mission that he's asking them to do because of two reasons. One, this idea of superhumans, of Atticus, of Zales Poseidon, is so terrifically like, it's such a mythical thing. It's like saying, all right, does anyone want to go meet Superman? Like, people don't think it's real. It's been so long since there's been a superhuman on planet Earth that they just don't think it's real. And so now Zeus is saying, hey, I'm going to go to this planet with all these superhumans on it. I need someone to come with me. I need people who have learned what I've taught you, kindness and compassion, because we need to help these guys. And so they agree. The second reason it was so terrifying is because you remember 413 years ago, there was a declaration saying that no human was allowed to... Sorry, this song has a lot of holes in it in and of itself. I need to find a different song for this. But there's a rule that was made that no humans could land on those planets. And so they were actually breaking a law that was 413 years old. But Zeus knew he needed to get back there. Because as you can hear from this music right now, the war is not getting better. It's getting worse. And... I mean, let alone these Desdemonians that are floating above the planets. Now you've just got each other that are killing each other. These superhumans are killing each other. And there is a great, great problem. We're going to go ahead and stop that song right now because I can't get through all the holes quite right. But there is a big problem. And so we're only going to be able to see some peace when Zeus makes it to that planet. All right, so that's where we're going to stop right now. Hope you have enjoyed the beginning of the Adventures of Atticus, Book 2, Reign of Doom. I'm going to say this again because I said it a whole while back, but especially now that we're getting into a second book, and maybe perhaps these new superhumans might be inspiring you, maybe drawing their cities or something like that, their societies, anything you like. But any illustrators that are out there that have been listening, I would love to see some pictures. That would be amazing. Absolutely wonderful. Also, if you are not so much interested in finding music, but you're actually a musician who likes to create music, then I would also love to see if you have any music that you could create that has sort of this energy as we get deeper into the story and you hear holes that are there. Maybe if you have some sort of music that could fill it with that particular kind of energy, that would be wonderful too. Fantastic. Thank you so much for listening, and join me next time on Monday for another episode of Adventures of Atticus.